Real lives, real people. The Non-Identity Podcast. The Non-Identity Podcast is sponsored by Limitless Power Boxing. Find them on Instagram for all your boxing needs. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching or listening to this, and welcome to another episode of the Non-Identity Podcast. Now, this week we're joined by the founder of the mobile app ProCabby. It's Andrea. Hi, Andrea. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Leah. I'm so pleased to be here. It's nice to meet you.
Before we get into what your mobile app is about and stuff, can you just let everyone know who you are and where you grew up?
Absolutely. So like you said, my name is Andrea Chase, and I hail from close to Ottawa, Canada, the capital city of Canada in that jurisdiction. And I'm an entrepreneur. You know, I'm co-founder of a professional services company, and I'm also, my baby is ProCabby, like you mentioned, and I'm the founder of that, trying to help shift and change the lives of many professional chauffeurs.
Your mental stamina is needed in entrepreneurship. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so this is actually something that kind of came to me after going through the highs and lows. Obviously, that is the journey of entrepreneurship, never just that straight, narrow path. I'm sure a lot of the listeners can appreciate that. And having a degree in psychology as a background, as well as a business management diploma, what I really realized was how when I wasn't in a good mental place, it was really impacting my business negatively. And so, especially with the pandemic thrown in there and all of the challenges that that created, I started to really recognize this piece of how important mental stamina is to be worked on continuously, and how when we work on it, it can actually help us go the distance in entrepreneurship, because it's, like I said, the highs and the lows. And what I really mean by mental stamina is engaging in activities and exercises that help keep our mental strength strong. It helps us to navigate when the going gets tough and to be able to mitigate basically difficult tasks over an extended period of time, right? So it's being sort of in a state of stress, but being able to manage that. And obviously, there's many tips and tricks of ways to do that that I've learned by reading up on it, but I've also learned from going through the trenches myself.
So, when you do wake up in that morning and you're running your business and you are feeling very low, how can you push yourself through it? Because I know sometimes when I've had low days, I don't even want to get out of bed, let alone think, oh God, I've got to go to that business meeting, or I've got to produce this presentation or something like that. So how do you take that first step, even just to get out of bed sometimes?
Great question. And I've definitely been there myself, and I'm sure many people have. So I think there's a whole laundry list, but in the essence of time, one of the biggest ways that I think we can work on our mental stamina is to focus on the wins in the business, no matter how big or small they are. And to be honest, that's, you know, one of the best pieces of business advice somebody very seasoned gave to me many moons ago. And I always held that tight. But to take that even a step further, you know, that can come in the form of, you know, accolades that you receive from partners or clients, other people in your industry, stuff like that. So you almost can create a folder. I do it on my cell phone, just like a note, and I try to collect all of the good things, right? So when the going's getting really, really tough, and maybe we're having a challenging time getting out of bed, it's something that we can always reflect back on. And it's I always say it's kind of like a love note to yourself, right? And so I think that one lesson that I'm basically highlighting here is to be kind to ourselves, right? Focus on the wins, no matter how big or small they are, and really relish in those, because when the going gets tough, that's something that I think can really help propel you forward. Above and beyond that, I know we hear a ton about personal care routines, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record, because we all, you know, we're being flooded with that notion. But there really is some merit to that, right? And that doesn't always mean having a bubble bath kind of thing with a glass of wine. Maybe it does, but maybe it doesn't. But it's doing the things that fill your soul with joy, right? So identifying, number one, what actually makes you happy. and I think sometimes we get so bogged down in this entrepreneur life, the hustle culture. That's a whole other, kind of topic of conversation. But if you really want to go the distance, we always say it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? So if you're going to go and run a marathon or engage in something like that, if you burn yourself out very quickly on, you're not going to make it to the finish line, right? So for me, I have my own personal care routines, but I know that looks different for everybody else. Another thing that I kind of came across in my research that I thought was really, really interesting was, aside from reading, and not just reading professional development books, but reading things that light you up, right? So pick your genre. Guilty pleasure, I do like a little bit of trash TV and magazines and stuff like that, but it just gets your mind completely away from what you're doing professionally, right? And sometimes that's just enough to reset your brain a little bit. And another thing that I thought was really curious was the notion of learning new vocabulary, or even going a next step and learning a new language. These things all work on the wiring of our brain, right? And that's what we're trying to get at here when we're building the mental stamina. It's wiring the brain, keeping those pathways really strong, but it's also having techniques in place. Like you said, you wake up that day and you don't want to get out of bed. What tools in your toolkit do you actually have that you can fall back on, right? So these things take time, but those are a few things of the big laundry list that I'd like to highlight.
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you're saying, because I noticed, so in my work, I work with young people in schools and stuff, but we do a lot of refocusing. So when they're sent out of their classroom, they come to me for the day, and we do a lot of mindset work and managing conflict and stuff. And a lot of things, and I don't know if you come across it when you do the psychology course, is we tend to focus a lot on the negative. So we can have a whole 6 hours and we can have a really bad 30 minutes. And that's the bit that we focus on. We don't sit there and think, I've had a great 5.5 hours. It was that 30-minute meeting went wrong, or that person didn't do what I needed them to do. And that's what we would dwell on. We don't sit there and think the 4 hours was so productive before that, and I've had a really good hour after that. It's that 30 minutes. So I think it's about, as you've just said, changing your mind around to thinking, as you said, taking the wins. And again, like you saying about the self-care. So my guilty pleasure for, if I just need to unwind quickly, is an episode of Friends, because that is just so easy watching. Yeah, that's so easy watching. Right, and my wife comes in and says to me, "Why are you watching that?" I said, "Because I ain't got to think." Like, it's easy humour to get on with. I ain't got to think and work anything out. I can just sit back, and it just gives me half an hour just to chill down, and then I can get on with what I need to do. So, as we said earlier on, your little baby's ProCabby. Do you want to explain to everyone what that is and what you're doing with that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that insight as well. I totally agree with you just on that point about focusing on negativity. I'm a culprit to that. I think we all do that. But some of that, some of that's conditioning, right? And that could be a whole other conversation. But I just wanted to say I completely agree with you. With regards to ProCabby, in short, we are a professional mobile application for professional taxi and limousine chauffeurs. So works very similar to a ride-sharing model, but I'll just be honest with you, Lee, I did not come from this space myself. This really was inspired by a personal situation, a pain point. A family member, actually a very close family member, had been driving taxi for over 30 years. And unfortunately, we can't deny the impact that ride sharing's, placed in that industry, and how a lot of these drivers are in this horrible predicament, not just here in Canada. This is a global issue,
Sorry to interrupt, because I don't drive anything. I'm not too sure about what ride sharing is. Would you be able to explain what ride sharing is, that whole space?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in this part of the world, we know the big names like the Ubers and Lyfts of the world. So technically what it is anybody who, is of a certain age and has a driver's license and a vehicle can essentially sign up into a ride-sharing platform and become a driver, right?
So it's Uber, basically.
Yeah. And they haven't undergone the training, the designation. They don't have the professional license that, and I know in the UK specifically, like, the knowledge is some of the best training in the taxi industry across the globe, right? So, but all that to say, we really wanted to carve out a space, have another tool in their toolkit. We know there's other apps out there, respectfully, but another supplementary income source for these drivers, because they are really struggling. They've lost everything they have. Their medallions are basically practically worthless in some parts of the world, including here. They can't afford to retire, but they can't really afford to incur the high fees to keep working, and it's a really horrible circumstance. So this really tugged at my heartstrings, to be honest. I get that sideways all the time, going, what the heck am I doing in this space? A woman at this age range. But you know what? It was inspired by that situation, and so we use our skill sets that we have with our professional services company, and we actually built the app ourselves from the ground up. So where we're at now is trying to get the word out there, build a community, and actually onboard drivers onto the platform. And lots of great features with the app, of course, but the biggest thing that is setting us apart, I would say, from, I know there's Free Now, there's Get, there's Didi, there's all these apps out there, and that's great, right? But some drivers will have 3-4 apps on their phone, and we love that. Use all the tools you can. But I respectfully speaking, in all my research to date, I've never found an application that's profit margin favors the drivers as much as we do. And so just to throw it out there, ProCabby actually gives the drivers 92.9% profit on all credit transactions. They clear that. And just with some of the competitors, not to name names, they could be taking 40 to 50% off the top from the drivers. So we really, we're not a social enterprise per se, but we have a huge social impact component to what we're doing here.
Struggles have you found over the time you've been going through with the app? So other than getting the word out there, getting people on, actually like building the app, and was there any struggles while that process was going on?
Yeah, so there's definitely been hurdles every step of the way here. So my partner, the IT manager, he led our team of developers, and we had challenges with staffing. We had challenges with people promising certain things and not delivering, and unfortunately having to actually let some people go in the development process. So it actually took us about 2 years to really build the app, including our own micro data center here outside of Ottawa. So IT security is really important to us, but that had its own challenges. And then when we soft launched the app, learned a lot of hard lessons, as you do, right? Looking back, hindsight's a beautiful thing, but you wouldn't have known it unless you went through it. And some of the bigger challenges that I can highlight are with respects to onboarding drivers, unfortunately. Particularly in Canada, the drivers love the sound of the app, but there's a lot of red tape in place and a lot of regulation. And unfortunately, we've encountered some really yucky situations where there's actually been some taxi company owners who've actually threatened disciplinary action to the drivers should they be caught using our app. And you know what, all we're really trying to do, it doesn't cost the drivers anything. We invite company owners to join us. We actually give drivers and company executives who get their fleet onboarded, we give them free equity shares in our company. It doesn't cost them a dime. Like, there's a lot of companies out there that there's a monthly fee. We don't even charge any of that. So that has been very disheartening, to be honest, because I see the struggle in these drivers' faces, and they're in this rock and a hard place, basically saying to me, I love what you're doing, I want to use the app, but I'm afraid for my livelihood, because if the company lets me go, I don't have enough income streams to sustain a living, unfortunately. So it's working through that. I mean, I became a lobbyist with the city of Ottawa. I am not a lawyer, but I've learned all kinds of things, and that's what we do as business owners. We wear all the hats, as we say. And so, yeah, that's been quite challenging. And then you throw a global pandemic in the middle of all of that as well, right? And we can't discount tons of industries respectfully were impacted. Ours was one of those. And so we're trying to repair and rebuild this. point in time. And what we've actually identified is we have a very strong interest in the EU, to be honest with you. And so right now we are back to the drawing board. We're making some really good updates to our app to have a proper launch in the EU. And so that's where we're at, because so much has gone into it. It is like my baby, and I'm having a hard time releasing, to be honest, but I also really want to see this impact people's lives.
At any point through this process, did you just think, why am I doing this? It's time to give up. I'll go look at something else. Because like going back to what you're saying about the mental stamina, was there points where you thought, is this worth it?
I don't know how many times I've asked myself that. I think we've lost tally of how many times. Yes, and I do share that publicly, that there's times that I go, can I keep doing this? How can I keep doing this? And, you know, we get very attached, especially when it's our own business, and it can be sort of hard to keep things in perspective at times. But I am very lucky that, you know, my partner is a little bit more rational, I would say, with regards to maybe that outlook. The other thing is, I go back to what I said before, and it's sort of related to the wins, but it's also thinking about the feedback that I've been given from some of the drivers that we do have on the platform, and thinking about all of those good things, and knowing I actually do a bit of a visualization exercise, to be honest with you. And that can help me propel to keep going and to keep working on this. What I visualize is this as a very big goal, right? You know, that big audacious goal, but being able to positively impact millions of people eventually. We start somewhere, but eventually to grow this company and to be able to help so many people. And that's what I always come back to. And it helps me regroup and say, yes, we are still going. The other thing is, somebody gave me some really good advice, one of my mentors at one time, and said, you know, sometimes the milestones are small, but if you're always moving forward, you're always propelling this process forward, then you have nothing to lose, you know? And we're actually at the point in time now where we're gearing up to raise our seed round for ProCabby, which is a whole other, you know, challenge in itself. But I think it's just a matter of, we are a very small but mighty team, but it's a matter of continuing to grow our team and to be able to see some of these milestones met in the growth of the process. I hope I answered that okay. I kind of went off a little bit, but
it's really, I just admire people that just want to get up and go and give it a go. And it just, I find, I don't know about where you are, but I just find as a society, we're very good at trying to help people build up. But as soon as they're getting somewhere, we then want to knock them back down. And that's the same thing. I think, like, as you're saying, like, the companies don't want to support you, but as you're saying, it's not costing them nothing. And in a way, if their drivers are more happy, then they're going to want to work more with them as well, because they want to be out more, because they're getting the money back. So it actually benefits to have different streamlines of revenue, because it keeps the drivers out longer, which then, in a way, will bring you more business to your company. So it doesn't make sense to me why they're giving you so much resistance.
Sorry to interrupt. 1,000%. Yeah, I totally agree. I agree with you. When people are happier, they do better work, they give more, they're more productive. And that's what it really comes down to at the end of the day. So people sometimes need to get out of their own kind of narrow thinking, don't they?
Yeah. So I just want to say, like, well done. And we're coming to the end, unfortunately. So I've got one last question. And this is a question I ask every guest. Your answer will not change your life journey so far. But if you had 30 seconds with your 13-year-old self, what would you say?
You know, it's funny, Lee, because I did listen to a few of your other podcasts, so I kind of knew you might ask me that, to be honest with you. But, you know, I'm a very explorative kind of person, and I would always encourage somebody, especially at that young, ripe age of 13, to explore the world. Travel, explore the world if you can. Even if you can't get out, you know, internationally, explore your own backyard. You know what I mean? be a tourist in your own backyard and do things, you know, it doesn't have to cost you a lot of money, but have that curiosity and that exploration. The other thing I would say is try almost everything within reason, right? Try it all, right? Because you might think at that age that you know what you want to do and you have your whole life carved out, but at the end of the day, I can assure you, you probably don't, unfortunately. But that's what it's all about, is trying things that light up your soul and follow those pathways, because we all, I think, can agree that money is great, but if that's your only driving force, unfortunately, I don't think that will get you very far in the long run. So that's what I'd like to share.
Well, brilliant. You've been a fantastic guest. I'd love you to come back on in a couple of months when you're launching in the EU, and we'll see how far you've come along on the journey with ProCabby. And thank you so much for the sort of tips about the mental stamina. I think when we think about mental health a lot, we think about, well, how can we deal with the situation we're in there and then. We don't think about, actually, I'm going to need the stamina to get through the next couple of months or anything. So I think that's really good advice as well. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for giving us your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Lee. I really appreciate your time too, and welcoming me onto this podcast. And I wish you much success with your podcast as well. And I look forward to continuing to be a listener. And thanks again for your time today.